welcome back to the lecture series on Partition of India in Print Media and Cinema. We are discussing accounts of the survivor, and we are actually talking about Cracking India by Bapse Sidhwa. In continuation to our discussion from the previous lectures, we are going to talk further about the women in Cracking India and Lenny growing up, in the presence of, in the vicinity of women and subalterns. The people surrounding the child actually enable in the shaping of the of her psyche. So, the people in the vicinity of Lenny actually shapes her child's psyche, and I have already explained. So, this story can be seen as being narrated at the heart of a cataclysmic event such as partition, and it's also a story of passage, the story of a child maturing and learning about the adult ways of the world, acquiring the adult lens to see the world, learning about religion, about gods and violence, about sexuality. So, it is a story where we see Lenny, the protagonist and the narrator, as someone privileged, to an extent spoiled, someone that is initially naive and yet acquires new knowledge about human possibilities, about human character, about the complexity of human character, and so she is caught up in the history and gains new insight about the larger world, how the world is full of deception, injustice, hypocrisy, cruelty, and how religion becomes a topic of conflict and turns one person against the other, even turns a long-standing friend against the other. So, the readers note how Lenny witnesses not only brutality, animosity and violence, but also the resilience of the human spirit and the power of individual courage. This is especially depicted through the character of Godmother, a powerful woman, and this is how Godmother has been described in the narrative. You cannot be near her without feeling her uncanny strength. People bring to her their joys and woes, show her their sores and swollen joints, distilling the right herbs, adroitly instilling the right word in the right ear. She secures wishes, smooths relationships, cures illnesses, battles wrongs, solaces grief and prevents mistakes. So, she is a figure of power, of courage, of positivity amid the chaos and the dismal, the general dismal conditions. So, she serves, Godmother serves as the figure of the feminine ideal, and she actually handles, she faces wrongdoing, any kind of social misdemeanor head on. So, she can directly squarely face mistakes, crimes and correct the matters. She is a figure of positivity, and so through the figure of Godmother, it actually dawns in Lenny that women are, generally speaking, pacifist. They do not resort to violence, men do, and women become the receptacle of a violence engendered by men, or through a homosocial or violence that is engendered through male-male disputes, actually affects the woman the worst. So, the book Cracking India describes in different parts of the novel, we see instances of female unity, where women are trying to protect each other and they are trying to balk the commotions that are caused by men. So, Sidhwa is successful in building a very strong image of the women that stand together in protecting the children, especially from the strangers or from any kind of negative pejorative influence. So, Sidhwa at one point says that mother voluptuous in a beige chiffon sari is alert, in charge, a lioness with her cubs, Ayah with her haunted nervous eyes is lioness number 2. Our pride on the veranda swells as Moti's wife and 5 children join us. So, it is an all female cosmos that commonly inform Lenny's process of growing up, the development of her child psyche. And then, like I said, she also interacts with men, but not the ones that are the chief architects and protagonists in the nation building process. These are mainly subalterns that in a way carry out the decisions that have been imposed on them from above. So, Lenny learns as she grew, with the progression of the narrative, Lenny learns that women are often victims, although they do not initiate the conflicts. And so, one instance of female victimhood or female victimage is Ayah, and there are also women in the story that have been referred, women who have been raped and then placed in rehabilitation quarters, quarters that are located next to Lenny's family home. So, the ensconced position, the elite position from where the story begins, in a way crumbles, it falls apart. Although Lenny belonging to the Parsi community is not directly affected, since the Parsis as a minority never participated or revealed their position in favor or against any communal group. Yet we see that Lenny's secure position, the development of her psyche, the way a normal and elite upbringing happens. So we see that Lenny's upbringing is in a way disrupted. Her development, this development of her psyche is disrupted. So there are new things that comes on her way, which clash with her ensconced status, her elite status, the way her parents would like her to grow up and see the world. So, so for example, the rehabilitation quarters next to her family home debunk the violence, the violated, debunk the hypocrisies that underlie the process of partition. So, the conditions that women were subjected to is revealed quite early to a child like Lenny, and she learns about words such as rape. So, she witnesses her mother's display of strength. So, the narrative is full of references to strong female characters. For example, Lenny's mother. Her mother, Lenny's mother and electric aunt smuggle gasoline to Hindu friends that are fleeing Lahore. So, they do it with considerable risk. And so, there are other instances, for example, the fight between Mr. Singh and Mr. Rogers over the idea of partition, where the wives, we see the role of the wives who attempt to make peace and in general alleviate the situation, prevent it from getting worse. And so, these are examples of women's sensible, non-violent, pacifist approach, and it also debunks, it also exposes how clash of male ego actually leads to any form of conflict, any form of war, and at the heart of all this, the worst victim is the woman. So, any form of disagreement among males victimizes women on a large scale, although they do not participate or corroborate such conflicts. So, on a daily life, in the everyday life, in the mundane course of events, even Ayah among the lower class people has, Ayah asserts her pacifist position. She takes little interest in religious violence. So, there is a point where there are discussions where other men, so her male friends discuss about the political ongoings, the larger political happenings, to which Ayah responds by just threatening to leave. So, she stands up and she says that if you talk of if this is the only thing you have to talk about, the Hindu-Muslim business, then I will stop coming to the park altogether. So, she strictly says that she is not interested in such discussions, and she would never participate in such heated arguments, in such altercations. And yet, the irony in the novel, or the irony in the real facts of partition, as we know, the irony lies in the fact that it is women like her who had the least to do with partition that get most badly affected. So, the unfathomable magnitude of the partition is further complicated by the narrative fracture, where we get two different first person voices. One voice that is located within the narrative frame, coming from the juvenile narrator Lenny, who is a child at the time when the when the actions are taking place, when the events, when she experiences the different events. And then there is another narrator who is commenting on the past from her vantage point, which is far away from the time space of the novel. So, Lenny that has grown up, and yet it is very difficult because the two voices in a way merge and overlap. So, the two eyes that we get are, at times it is very difficult to distinguish them, and this is more so because the immediacy of the partition does not go away with the passing of years. The magnitude of pain, sufferance and trauma lives on even after the events have occurred, and they come back to haunt. So, it is difficult to say whether the I is from the position of memory, if it is speaking spontaneously from within the events as they happen live. So, for example, the I that announces that night I have the first nightmare that connects me to the pain of others might not be the first 5-year-old Lenny. It is a statement made in retrospection. This happens when Lenny dreams of the Nazi soldier before the partition happens. So, I is an older Lenny. In this case, I is an older Lenny, someone that survives the partition and speaks about her nightmare from the position of memory. So, Shirley Chu would say that by situating Lenny's narrative in the present, Sidhwa imposes limits upon her perspective. However, this is only one aspect of a complicated strategy, and it is also the occasional backstepping into the past tense, which renders time an unstable factor in the novel and blurs the line separating the immediacy of experience from the vividness of a memory in which events are branded over an inordinate length of time. So, even after 40 years have passed, it seems that Lenny continues to live the traumatic memories, the memories of hellish fires, of mobs, and of a childhood, a chunk of which is lost. So, it is very difficult to pinpoint and locate the and distinguish thereby the past from the present. So, and the treatment of time in the treatment of time in the novel is very complicated. It moves back and forth between the two eyes. Now, Jennifer Yusin and Deepika Bari would say that distinguished from each other by time, the two first person voices are, however, not two different people. They are rather the same Lenny, the one and the same Lenny. So, on the one hand, we have the younger Lenny, the child Lenny, within the time frame of the novel. That is someone, the character that is witnessing the events as they unfold, as they unravel, and who is therefore walking through the novel. I mean, it's a person that is experiencing the happenings in accordance with the historical chronology of the partition. And then there is the older Lenny who survives, who is a partition survivor, who is a citizen of Pakistan and who has returned to the events of younger Lenny. And so, she is outside the story frame and she is commenting on what younger Lenny has witnessed, experienced and learned. So, the I that narrates the nightmares can be read either as the younger Lenny or the older Lenny, and also a simultaneous presence of the two. So, here it is like I said, it is very difficult to distinguish one I from the other. The story is churning out through an interlacing, through an interweaving of the adult and the juvenile psyche. This demonstrates the very problem of accounting for the traumatic event at the time, at the very moment when it is experienced. So, we have already discussed trauma and PTSD and how it is very difficult to claim that one has come out of trauma once and for all. How the feeling of trauma, the aftermath of trauma lives on, and there are situations, like critics have said, where the person experiences or remembers nothing at the time when the event is taking place, but the repercussions happen afterwards. They keep coming back in a cyclic fashion to the trauma survivor. So, there is hardly a question of coming out of trauma. One could very well argue that the juvenile Lenny is as much talking from the hurt, from the pit of trauma, as is the adult Lenny, who is commenting, who is further commenting on the juvenile individual's perspective. So, the most poignant aspect of Lenny's nightmares is that they intertwine history and the individual in a way that allows the reader to examine partition as a historical trauma. So, we have already discussed how the trauma of the individual interacts with the larger trauma that is happening all over India. And so, the two traumas actually speak to each other and in a way escalate and amplify the effect of each other. So, the image of Lenny's we have also talked about how the dismembering of Lenny's foot, polio-stricken foot through multiple surgeries suggests or is symbolic of the violent separation, tearing away of Pakistan from India. So, dismembering happening at a microcosmic level and then at the level of and then at the macrocosmic level too. So, when we look at Lenny's dreams, they anticipate the partition as a historical trauma, which is already bound to memory, right. So, the first person voice is always already the older Lenny, and through narrating Lenny is attempting to return. It is a story of guilt, because she was not able, she was instrumental in fact in Ayah's abduction. She played an instrumental role in Ayah's abduction. So, the story, the first person voice is always already the older Lenny, and through narrating the story she is attempting to return to the core of the event, to the heart of the mishap of the cataclysm, to the heart of the mishap and the cataclysm, and it's also a way of looking back and thereby re-articulating and attempting to integrate the experience, an otherwise fragmented experience, trying to make sense of what happened back then when she was a child. So, so it is a story of one could read it as a confessional in a way. There are so many ways. It is a social history, it is a counter history, it is the story of a child seen through the child's lens, and then it is also confessional. It is a way of purging one's guilt, of not it's a way of making up for Lenny's inability, the child Lenny's inability to save a long-standing friend, her Ayah. So, these are so many different ways of reading the novel. What propels the narrative? What is the force that drives the narrative forward? So, through these disturbing depictions of violence, whose images haunt the readers even beyond the narrative. The images, they stay with the reader, and through these depictions, the novel interconnects Lenny's personal individual trauma with the partition as a historical trauma, collective trauma for all the Indians, for the entire subcontinent, because this is also a story at the personal level, a story of losing one's trust, losing a friend, growing up, learning the ways of the grown up, of the adults in a hard way, in a harsh way. So, learning the harsh ways of the world, and so testimony to the partition as a historical trauma is only possible through this interconnection, through connecting Lenny's personal loss, Lenny's inner psychic journey with the larger schema of partition. So, we see in a scene that Lenny and her younger brother, her cousin, actually ripping a doll, and they succeed in ripping apart the legs and in splitting the doll's body. Later, Lenny starts crying over the torn body of the rag doll. So, this doll, Lenny's fury turns this doll into a collective image that represents the violence that the child has internalized, violence of her nightmares, and the violence that she witnesses outside everywhere, rampant killing, violence of the mobs, the riots, and something that have seeped into her, and shape her fantasies. So, now this is a child fantasy, ripping off a doll, and it has gone on to become so violent. It is emulating what is happening in the larger world. So, Lenny does not simply act out her violent fantasy, but the scene is a collective repetition of her multiple traumas. It is a way of taking out what she is imbibing from her immediate society, from her immediate surrounding. She takes it out on the doll through ripping it apart. So, the doll, through this representation of the doll, we see that Lenny's individual trauma through successive operations of her polio-stricken foot collapses with the trauma of the partition. So, Lenny splitting the doll is actually her attempt to grasp the violence of the surgery as well as the violence of partition, the surgery that was made on the nation which separated Pakistan from India. So, through her feet, I mean, it would not be wrong to say that the child is experiencing the partition through her body. It is a very, it is a female child, especially able child that grasps the violent meanings inscribed in partition, in the ongoings of partition through her body. She realizes the process through what is happening to her. So, Lenny belongs to the image of the naked child as she is metamorphosed from the crucified children. So, the doll is as much a representation of Lenny as it is of the naked child and the crucified children from her dreams. So, Lenny has to grasp the meanings, the significance of the violence around her through becoming both the aggressor and the victim. So, it is a very powerful scene. I am referring to the film, especially Deepa Mehta's Earth, where the child rips the doll and then immediately afterwards starts crying. So, we see the dual role that the child plays, that of the aggressor and immediately afterwards of the victim. So, the spectre of partition disrupts Lenny's cozy life. She watches Ayah, she watches how Ayah's circle of admirers dissolve. They suddenly take on their communal identities. So, one day they were all friends, the next day they become Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs and what not, so the Christians. So, all of these people, regardless of their communal belonging or identity, were drawn by Ayah's beauty, and yet this entire group of close knit friends fall apart due to religious intolerance. They are overcome by extremist ideas and they start spewing venom through the language they use for each other. So Lenny learns. So, her process of growing up is through interacting, is through accepting how violent humanity can be, how the possibilities that a human, how violent humans can be. So, for example, she learns that the little Muslim boy that she had played with during her trip to the countryside was the only survivor when a looting band attacked his village, and as a result of this attack, the men from the village, the men in the village were massacred, the women were violated, and the only human left to survive was that Muslim boy. So, and then we already discussed how Lenny and her brother watch parts of Lahore burn from the rooftop, and they listen to weeping women that are introduced to them by way of adults' conversation as Giri hui aurat, fallen women, because they are rape victims and they have been rejected by their families and they have been relegated to rehabilitation centers. So and in the end, she acquires her guilt-stricken self, something that she can never get over with when she witnesses the kidnapping of Ayah by a gang led by the ice candy man, who also happened to be her very dear friend. So, she loses friends, she loses trust, she learns the ways of the world, new revelations that are not pleasant, obviously. And so, this story also tells us how during a cataclysm, during a socio-political situation that partition gave rise to, how a child is introduced to the question of sexuality, sexuality, man-woman relationship. It's not very normal. It's not something that the child is going. It's not a very normal and simple story of passage, because whenever Lenny henceforth would remember Ayah's romantic relationship with the Monsieur, she would understand it in juxtaposition with the ice candy man's role as a turncoat, as a defector, and as a murderer, who also facilitated the process of Ayah's abduction. So, the revelations, the entry into adulthood is never smooth, and a child could cherish afterwards during the partition. This actually goes on to tell us how a partition damaged a generation of a generation's childhood dreams, hopes, and the general innocence of childhood. With this, I am going to close our discussion on cracking India, and I will meet you again with another topic and another lecture. Thank you.